Hello, everyone, and welcome to Munch and Learn today. This is our pre-Easter one, so I can't see you eating chocolate, but I'm sure you are. As again, we'll go around, everyone introduce themselves, and then I'll hand over to Nathan, who's going to lead today's session, which will be a bit different because it's more interactive. So make sure you have your questions prepped. But I'm Liam Henderson, Chair of the Rail Innovation Group, and I'm going to move to Adam Sargent.
Hello, Adam Sargent. I'm currently a graduate at Network Rail working within the East Midlands route.
Someone called Chris without a surname?
Me?
Probably, yeah.
So I'm Chris Johns. I'm founder of Passageway, smart digital signs. We work with TfL, Transport for Wales, and got some other exciting things happening.
Great. And we've got Peter Hicks.
Hi, Peter Hicks, Director at Open Train Times, owner of Cats, and seemingly far too busy despite the fact it's a long weekend this weekend.
Well, it's good to hear. Craig O'Brien.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Craig O'Brien. I'm the engineering manager for UK Tram. Saw the subject, got an invite, thought it was an interesting one to dial into. So thank you and looking forward to it.
Welcome. Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm a bid manager at Hitachi Rail.
Chris Jones.
Hi everyone, Chris Jones. I'm at the DFT. I'm a senior policy advisor on, it's called Global Travel Task Force and Future Travel. So I have no long weekends because I'm trying to save everyone summer holidays at the moment. Yeah.
Thanks. Christos.
Hi everyone, I'm Christos Mexius. I'm a consultant at Arcadis, and I was also very interested in the topic because in the before times when we could have face-to-face meetings, it's something that I think the Rail Innovation Group has talked about a lot. So it will be interesting to see what we come up with this time.
Thank you. Got George Robbins.
Hi, George Robbins, founder of Repay Solutions. Yeah, part consultant, part software solution at the moment.
Liam Crozier.
Hello, I'm Liam Crozier. I'm a PhD student. I also do a lot of work around rail infrastructure data as well.
Great, thank you. I've got Neil Stone.
Hi everyone, I'm Neil. I've spoken at one of these events previously about designing innovation. I run a practice called Leapstone. I also used to be head of design at British Airways and at GNR on the East Coast Main Line.
Fabulous, thank you. Sven Costa.
Hi, I'm Sven Koster. I am looking after the innovations and new business development at Go Media, and we are bringing digital passenger services to transport operators.
And we've got Zach.
Hello everyone, I'm Zach at Travel AI. I'm a co-founder, and we're in the business of helping transport operators and infrastructure owners understand more about how their customers are using their services and a breadth of multimodal activities.
Great. Thank you. And Juliana?
Hi there, I'm Juliana Motes. I'm a safety engineer at HS2.
Brilliant. So lastly, the person to, oh no, we've got one more. I'm just going to jump upon as they come into the screen. So Lucy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good timing. I'm just randomly sitting in my kitchen and the dog's going mental. Hello everyone, I'm Lucy Pryor, Business Engagement Director at 3 Squared, and it's been a long time since I've made one of these, so I'm really happy I'm here.
Yes, we're happy you're here. Thank you, welcome. So without further ado, I shall pass to Nathan, who can hopefully introduce himself.
Right, thanks Liam. Hi everyone. Let me just share. Should be able to see. Can you see the charts?
Yep, we can.
Excellent. So, listen, thank you very much for attending and allowing me to say some words from my experiences anyway. And I've known Liam for about, it's bizarre, I've known Liam for about 2 years, although it seems like 6 months because we've gone through this wormhole called COVID that we've lost a year on. So what I'm going to do is just go through a bit of my background and where I'm coming from, and some of the experiences I've had in my career at IBM. So I've just left IBM, and I was in IBM for the best part of 34 years. I normally say I joined at the age of 2, but that would be a lie. or other things along those ways. But ideally, if you come away with something new, bit of value, then my job's done. And I'll put some caveats on and everything else. I'll point out that if I was still in IBM, not this is a negative point, I would have to go through the press office to have any calls like this. I think Liam knows this in the past, and probably would have to caveat everything. But there's no negative stuff. It's just some of the experiences that I've had. And really, I know this says working with customers, and it's really for both sides. I think we've all witnessed, certainly over the last 5 years, most engagements aren't necessarily suppliers or customers anymore. It's become a lot more nebulous, which I think is a good thing. And so some of these points, from my perspective, are working with procurement departments and working with smaller companies that are working with IBM and some other larger companies that I've had collaborations with. So it may not necessarily be procurement supply, but I think some of the points that I see are really worthwhile. And please interrupt or ask any questions. But hey, we'll start. So I left IBM on the 5th of February, and actually there's sort of two parts of my life now. One, I started my own consultancy, but the other part, which I'm not sure I told Liam, is actually the other half of my life is I started a degree for all my sins, which was meant to be sort of half the day, but actually my degree work starts at 8 o'clock most nights now until about 11 o'clock. So that's where I am, Saturdays and Sundays, I should say. My background is predominantly in sales in IBM, but it's also a strategist. And in the last 5 years, I've been sort of leading some of the strategy for travel and transportation in IBM. But my core original role in sales was in aerospace and defence. And I learned quite a few interesting lessons there, that you'll be working with a company as a partner in the morning, and in the afternoon, they'll be one of your competitors. Things like the 25-year NDA existed as well. And learning the lessons of actually having specific NDAs to specific topics. And the other thing that, I say, not disrespectful, that I learned over probably 20 years is working with different procurement departments, which I'm sure everybody on this call has done at some point and has some challenges around those. So I'll cover a couple of points on that. With regards to the last 5-10 years in travel and transportation in IBM, I covered airlines, airports, rail, cruise ships, even active transport, a bit of roads, but also data strategy and supply chain. And what specifically has happened over the last 5 years in T&T, but also in other areas, is that I don't necessarily think it's totally appropriate, but the world is becoming more flat. And with the advent of new technology, IoT, things like blockchain and AI, I've seen the barriers of entry into technology, and it's not just about technology. There's the next 20 minutes or so. I've seen the barriers go down so that this allows SMEs to enter the marketplace a lot quicker, a lot easier than they have done before. And there's a couple of things as dynamics that has made some of the corporates, for want of a description, to change their way in terms of the marketplace. So I think it's a good thing. There's more agility and there's greater ideas as well. I've been involved as well with travel tech startups, with Jacobs Media, and personally, I have a big passion in SMEs as well in the travel space. So this is an ideal opportunity for me to take part. Just a bit of housekeeping. I'm going to go through a few things which I would say, in inverted commas, are the blatantly obvious. And I apologize in advance if some of this stuff is a bit sort of fundamental and a bit from A to B. But certainly in the last 20 years, the blatantly obvious now and then it seems to get missed. It's a bit like an MOT. It's sometimes worthy to have a conversation about that and some of the points that I'll raise. I'm not limited to the IBM experience. the last 5-10 years, I've been working in different sort of settings in the ecosystem, so with large companies and also some of the SMEs, as I said, sort of small one-man bands and a whole range of different organisations, including those overseas as well. None of it's meant to be negative. And some of the things, I don't necessarily have seen anything really, really negative in where I've worked and some of the experiences. If I come across as negative as a caveat, it's probably to labour the point or a bit of cynicism on that. So I apologise in advance. But if you do have any questions, obviously probably won't be apt to name the companies that, and I'll try and answer. Or if I don't know the answer, I'll come back with some viewpoints on that. The key thing on when I went through some of the notes on this last week, and I thought this through, I think the real message is for both sides is to set the expectation in any engagement, whether you're selling with, through, to, you're a supplier, you're a partner, you could be part of a joint venture, buyer, or whatever, is probably set up as you mean to go on. And I'm going to cover a few points on that to set precedent, because invariably when you have a dialogue, either a large corporate with a smaller company and a smaller company with a large corporate, most of the mistakes and most of the challenges that emanate in the roadmap, whether it's a roadmap or the journey that you're in, can be about IP or whatever, probably could have been fixed possibly in the first few conversations. And I've found that quite significantly, even 6 months, a year down the line, when someone turns around and said, oh, that wasn't the expectation that we had. And I'm sure some of you have experienced that as well. So that's probably the most important, one of the most important lessons that I thought about in this, that expectation setting up front is absolutely vital. So I'm generally quite a humorous person, so some of these images are more provocative to make you think about things and to get the message across. But please ask questions as we go on. This is the first one that I've been on, so very happy to answer any questions as we go forward. Is that okay? Some silence is golden. So I've named this. This is actually my wife thought this was. She was quite right. She identified it as a Soviet army. I put the real Mr. Smith step forward. Invariably, certainly from smaller companies, engagements with larger ones can be one-way visual, that the large company may know more about the smaller company than what the background is with the individual that you have in the corporate. This can actually lead to confusion and quite a bit of waste of time. And I think this comes back to the point of really qualifying who the individual is. And I'll be very upfront. Some of the pitfalls that I've seen have been by myself. And one of the key things is, if I was in IBM and someone said, what's your title? I say it's Travel and Transportation Industry Solutions Business Development. It's about 25 points in Scrabble. And that's really difficult for anybody outside of IBM to actually understand what I actually do, apart from the words business development. And really getting down to what the individual is actually doing, what their motivation is absolutely vital at the beginning for a number of reasons, which I'll go through as well shortly. A couple of examples of that, personal ones. So where it's bizarrely, these sort of mistakes can happen. I had an account manager that worked for me when I was a sales manager who went for a meeting, and it was an internal meeting. So this is within the same company. And I introduced her to someone that she should speak to about a particular product. And she came back from the meeting and she said that was one of the most bizarre conversations that I've ever had for half an hour. And I wasn't too sure he really knew what I was talking about. When she went back to her desk, the phone rang and it was a person that she was meeting, said, why haven't you turned up? So she had half an hour's conversation with someone that actually was meeting someone completely different for half an hour. And likewise, I've been to a meeting with another IBM colleague who was selling a particular product. And it wasn't when to enter the customer, and I was the account manager. I hadn't met this individual contact. We sat down, and the account manager, the client, thought that the person I was with was the account manager because they'd seen him for a year or 2 years and not me, and actually been having a dialogue for the best part of 18 months on completely 2 different agendas, which sounds, again, bizarre, but it's that qualification up front that can stop an awful lot of unpicking or waste of time, or anything along those sort of lines that could take time to recover the situation. Now, some of the things that I've learned, or I've seen, or I've been actually asked from SMEs or other companies, is how do you qualify that the right person? It's really straightforward, of course. Ask them what they actually do and how they want to engage. The key thing is that there's a couple of, I won't say tricks of the trade, but one of the key things to actually start to triangulate this position is, one, looking at their organisation, ask for organisations, charts, etc. The other thing, in terms of how you work, and it works both sides, of course, and to qualify it, is actually, do they own the P&L? And invariably, although good intentions are the objective, sometimes, often, when someone hasn't got the P&L, then there is a higher risk that you could actually spend an awful lot of time speaking to them, and actually you find out that it's one of the wrong people, or that you should be introduced to someone else. And the other one, I would say, as a litmus test, is asking for an NDA and who actually is responsible for the NDA. So an example, I could never sign an IBM NDA, but the line of business at a more senior level was able to do it. It would be up for me to justify that. And the one last thing, which I was looking up yesterday, actually, I'm not sure if it's out of date, but it's always quite useful, and I'll cover, is BANT, which is, do they have the budget? Do they have the need? Do they have the time? And do they have the authority? Which sounds like a straightforward Route 101, but actually asking those questions up front, again, can qualify actually if this is the right person, or actually speaking to the right division, which we'll come on to. Makes sense? Am I on the right lines, Liam? Anything, thoughts, or people? There's a whole heap of other stuff, of course.
Well, apart from it sounding like some sort of farcical circus inside IBM, yes.
Yeah, I was going to say, I should stand up and say, my name's Nathan Butler, and I've been institutionalised. So it's been about 8 weeks after that. But yeah, no, I take that on board. But we'll see. This is going to almost sound IBM, but it's a cracking example. The other thing is, which invariably is the one of the major things, is, are we talking to the right division? Which sounds absolutely bizarre and strange, but this is, for me, probably one of the largest challenges, if not the biggest challenge, for anybody outside, or vice versa, I would say, in terms of understanding the capability and who they're actually speaking to. So there's a couple of things with larger companies. Respectfully, you can have different divisions within the companies that actually potentially could compete or could complement. And that's quite critical, how you go forward, to understand that, because you may actually be discussing or have a discussion or point of view or strategy with possibly the wrong division. And that comes back to triangulating and having the right person that you're speaking to, and understanding fully the organisation that you can take forward. And there could be competing divisions within the company that you're discussing as well, or having in discussions with. And that's something that's come up previously, in my experience, in another company, interestingly. The example that I also give, which actually wasted 3 months, was I was responsible for a particular aviation account, and we were working for a resourcing company that had specific resource for a particular technical capability. And they had finished a particular project, and they were keen to work with IBM further. And it was, I helped them set up a new renewal process with IBM procurement, which took about 3 or 4 months. And it was something I shouldn't really do, but I I looked after and managed it through the process. And the individual was really, really pleased. The fact was that there actually was no other opportunity for this particular capability. And actually, although I helped set up this wonderful forms and everything else and got approval, there was actually no business at the end of it. Now, that was my fault in terms of really thinking wider on this. And it sounds, as I say, stating the obvious on that. But also for the individual, although he was working with other divisions, it should have been qualified better to work it through. So there were 3 months that we set up something that worked a treat, but actually there was no business at the end of it. And I've seen 2 or 3 instances of that going forward. And as I say, that sounds like Rule 101, but it's very easy to actually not see the woods for the trees on that. Now, how do you get around that? Again, who you're engaging with, what's the organization? And the other key thing on this is significantly is understanding the people that you work in either side is how close they are to HQ, or what I would say is worldwide. And qualifying that. And that may mean a position where the services that you're offering or the product that you're actually offering, the IP that you have, could actually be superseded by a grander strategy within the other organization. So it's always quite, it's quite advantageous to be able to work out the individual, how close they are to the HQ or the decision-making perspective, particularly on R&D, or it could be acquisition of other companies. Now, they won't necessarily be able to share that, but it could qualify out potential journey that you could go on that could actually result in not a great deal of value at the end of it. And the other thing, which I do like the question is when you're engaging, is agree upfront what success looks like, what it means for both parties. And from that, you'll get a roadmap, of course, which you can document to understand where the other person is actually coming from. And that doesn't necessarily happen too often in some of the experiences I've had. And quite often you'll have various follow-up meetings and still talk about the same stuff. But actually, you believe you know what each other would be for success, but you actually haven't documented. Now, obviously, could come out in things like NDAs and MOUs and everything else along those lines. But really understanding that and qualifying up front could save an awful lot of time. So the other one, why has it gone so quiet? Again, post-engagement, you get the desert feeling that no one's actually come back. From my experience, invariably someone has left. There's been a reorganization, open brackets, IBM close brackets, which happens quite often. Or sadly, being dangerously cynical, they don't need you anymore. And that is one of a large waste of time to unpick and rebuild what you think might be a good idea. And this comes back to triangulating not just one person, but more than one, of course. This is one of the biggest banes, certainly in some of the smaller companies working with the larger ones. And in the past, I've had many a call where I've had to pass on the bad news that someone has left, or the work hasn't actually been completed, or it's still work in progress, but no one's actually leading on that. So again, triangulate, prepare to be frustrated or be frustrated in terms of chasing down. There are other areas that you can use to help triangulate it, depending on the organization. If you're partnering, there's normally a channel organization. If that is the route to market for one of the companies that you can contact, there's a customer relationship department probably, and there's also procurement or accounts payable or anything like that. But it's ideally to triangulate with someone in the line of business that you're working with, so they actually broaden and mitigate the risk with regards to the engagement. So one of my favorite sayings we used to call, are we actually wasting our time? And there was invariably quite a few respectfully people that we would call hobbyists, which normally talk about a particular setting, capability or whatever, that actually coming back may not own P&L, may not be business development. And after some workshops and everything, you find out that actually these weren't the right people that you were having dialogue with. Again, this comes back to budget, triangulation, P&L, BANT, and actually ensuring one of the suggestions is if you do have workshops, make sure there's other people from that organisation in, so you can broaden and understand fully the scope and the strategy that those individuals are actually working under. And certainly, if it's workshops, again, clearly Route 101, NDA, and if people are reluctant to have NDAs, invariably the end game may actually require one, and to save an awful lot of time is to agree an NDA up front and sort that out rather than last minute having the footprints on my chest of not being able to proceed because we haven't got an NDA in place. Do I feel exposed? Quite often, again, this may be a buyer, maybe something you're going to partner with, or you may be a seller. Quite often, either side may be a pinch point in the process or a pinch point in the marketplace that you're working with. Sometimes other companies, of course, will have a mutual client that they want access to contacts, access to the ecosystem. One thing that I was always challenged with was regards to they may want access to a marketing budget. I think about one example, about 10 or 15 years ago, to get, for me, a £60 ticket at Farnborough Air Show took 3 levels of signature before I was approved to do that. So invariably, larger companies don't necessarily have the budget to hand. So it can work either way on that. So there's a number of reasons why someone proactively would engage with another company, of course. But again, it depends on the evolution of the contact, what really success looks like, which I've mentioned before, document it and ban. The other thing that I think not often enough is said up front is not only what success looks like, but also not often said is when do we shake hands and say, this doesn't work? When should we walk away and we know that this isn't going to go any further, that we can be honest with each other? And that should be agreed really, really at the start, because rather than have an idea and a project that's a lingering death, to understand that you've agreed that. And it can be quite a difficult conversation to have because everybody's got a fantastic idea and how they take it, and that's quite often why it's forgotten. But invariably, I've been involved in a few projects that actually, in terms of expectation setting, we probably should have done that up front rather than 3, 6 months, maybe 18 months that we've actually wasted time. And just leading up, one of those phrases I used to use, what's the relationship like? Would you be invited for Christmas or are you just round on Boxing Day for a couple of drinks? You're going to have to weigh this up in terms of either side of the camp, whether you're large, whether you're small, in terms of how important this dialogue is for you. In terms of resources, time, capability, and IP. And if it's really important to you, then don't just wait for the RFI and the RFP. And this is really important, coming back to the beginning of it, but become intrinsically involved with the company. That could be with their R&D, or at least having dialogue with them and understanding and you know, being honest and appreciative of how you work. Now, I know people like Network Rail have the SME action plan or the program on those sort of things. But procurement generally, and I said with respect, generally will work towards the commodity, to the price. And certainly, you know, coming back to the point about new technology and new capabilities and access to the marketplaces, there's an awful lot of companies out there that are really agile, and it may be more than their product or their service that they can provide, or the knowledge. It could be their customer service. And I think this is really, really important, because if you're selling to one organization, you go down the RFI, RFP route, it's pretty much a railroad. And it's very difficult to sometimes get your point across outside of that framework, certainly when you're in it. So being able to do that and having that sponsor for you. And I'm not talking about circumnavigating the RFI process, but understanding and appreciating the value that you're able to add, I think is quite key. And I got involved in an organisation when I was in A&D, Aerospace and Defence, called the Cambridge Services Alliance. And they were specifically looking at companies that would go to market originally as a product, but then would sell it as a service. So it could be engines on aircraft and a whole heap of other stuff. And I got involved with a researcher on the sort of ecosystem. And one of the things that was really quite apparent, and this is about 10, 15 years ago, is that, yes, the product's obviously important, the service is really important. And did it tick all the boxes? Was it 100% compliant with what they wanted? But what's become more important since then, certainly in what I've seen, is how agile and flexible you are to change. So if the end user is going to change their requirements, how quick you are. And it may be more important than delivering the specific product up front. May not be, but generally, if you're able to move and change quicker, that could be the differentiator in the marketplace. So try and do that before the guidelines come down, and also try and avoid the commodity play, of course, but set the expectations up front with any sponsor that you have. And lastly, I'll put stay with me, please. Having someone as a sponsor in an organisation or a company that can be quite challenging to find the people or get the time of the people, I know we all agree is incredibly invaluable and worth their weight in gold, so to speak. And I think helping you sort of from the qualification perspective on the bank side of things, being able to broker the wider organisation and passionately believe in terms of the value that you're going to add in either the partnership, as a buyer, as a seller, is fundamental. I'm currently helping an organisation through no one's particular fault get paid in a previous life. And that's been very challenging from being outside and then trying to go back in and engaging other resources to be able to do that. No, it can be immensely frustrating. And certainly sometimes working with a larger company is frustrating, and quite often people that work in the larger company can sympathise with that. Certainly I can on those sort of fronts. But I think the triangulation and the band with the individuals and being able to broker that is probably the most important thing, because there will be some mistakes, there will be some issues, and there will be some time wasted. But fundamentally, what I really wanted to finish off is setting the expectation up front, making sure clearly you know who you're speaking to, triangulating that position. And I'll go back to the point, when do we shake hands, have a coffee and say, well, it was worth a punt, and we finish and walk our merry way. And those were some of the things, just to start the dialogue going, that I'd penned down for Liam to cover. I'm sure some of them resonate, and maybe there were some that I didn't mention that need to be raised or discussed. And that's pretty much it. Now, my wife thought it was probably a bit challenging, but this is a friendly picture, because companies, I say, can coexist, and 1 + 1 can equal 3. So I'm very passionate about this, the smaller companies and the value that they can add in the rail industry, into the aviation, and virtually every industry, of course, from the start-up to the larger company quality. And that was a sort of 36,000 feet overview, Liam. I hope that was okay.
It was great. If I could ask you to unshare your screen so that we can see the group again. And then I'll put the gallery back up, which is here. So I know quite a lot of people had 1230s, so they've disappeared. But for the people left on with us, here is your opportunity to ask the expert without having to be polite. So kick off with pressure if you have them. You don't need to type, you can just do it. I am going to start then with, when you said the specific NDAs for the specific topics, if you're not allowed, sorry, for example, in your situation, you weren't authorized to sign the NDA. So how are you going to define the topic you're allowed to talk about if you're not allowed to sign the NDA?
So I'm not allowed to sign it, but I would, the way the process would work was, say if I was working with a smaller company in IBM, I say specific projects, it's particularly compartmentalized, so it could be project XYZ, and we agree that. So I would put that on the NDA, it's project XYZ, but I would authorize the individual to sign that. Well, I would pass it on to the authority to sign that, yeah? So the specific project, I believe, and maybe people have a different viewpoint on that, is quite important, because it can limit, from experience, certainly some of the other companies, in terms of, or it can make it too broad when you don't want to make it too broad, if that makes sense. So it can limit them to do something from somewhere else, potentially, with another company. So where I say I'm not authorized, the signatory is authorized. Now, what I would tend to do is try and get the signatory to fully understand why they're signing the NDA, who's it for, and have some sort of try and dialogue. Because invariably, in my experience, I get a vice president or an MD of the business coming back to me in the previous slide, Liam, saying, I signed an NDA about 2 years ago, and what happened, Butler? So that sort of engagement is important from a political point of view, because you'll need these people later on if there's funding, if there's things along those lines. Because it's a bit embarrassing when you go, do you remember the so-and-so, so-and-so? So it sort of dilutes your situation. So I would be, in answer to your question, inherently, I was responsible for the content in the NDA and who it was for, but I wasn't able to sign it. I had to justify it.
Right, thank you. For this, I saw you about to start talking, George. Were you about to ask a question?
I was, yeah, and then I tried to think about how I'm going to word it. It's probably a bit further down the line once you've got beyond NDAs, but your perspective on, I suppose, your service agreement or their service agreement. So if you're an SME, you might get the pressure to leverage one of their service agreements to save on, just to sort of get through it a bit easier. But yeah, your thoughts on that?
In terms of the power, and I'll use the word political power and the pressure in terms of a larger company over a smaller one.
Yeah. So basically, yeah, rather than they sort of put pressure on the SME to go, well, can we use one of our templated service agreements for supplyment of services or etc. or product, rather than the small businesses one. Thoughts on that?
So my thoughts on that. That is probably one of the most difficult ones to answer, not just for this, but just generally, because yes, I think is the way, if you really see the value in the other company, and this comes back to the sponsor, is, when I spoke about the guidelines going forward on the procurement perspective, I mean, just to roll back, going back to the NDAs, I generally use the NDAs of the other company, which my former company would say, and I'll be careful what I say now, would say you have to use our NDA, okay? Invariably, there was flexibility. I know we're not talking about NDAs, but invariably there was flexibility on that, because I thought it was quicker and it was easier, and you didn't have sort of like X number of years on NDAs. The service agreement and the contract effectively is saying whether it's product or services. I think, personal view, I think that's becoming, you all may have something completely different. I think that's becoming more flexible, and I think that's more in this, certainly over the last couple of years, is being more 50-50. Now, you may have a completely different view on that. I think things like 10, 15 years ago, payment terms, was it 60 days and 30 days and all that, there was a lot of pressure on the larger companies to help support the SMEs. And I think that is changing. I've seen that's changing. There's no answer to this apart from, again, that's the commodity play, who your competition is, who you're working with, and what power that you can give on this. I have to say, and maybe this is the best answer I can come up with, is where I said getting intrinsically involved, and them being really aware of the capability, the value, and yourselves helps get better deals across the line. And that's sort of like anecdotal. But absolutely right. I'd be naive to think there's not companies saying, here's a contract and you will sign it, otherwise we won't use you again, in not so many words type scenario.
Okay, and to follow up on that, so we come back to the other end of the sales cycle, in engaging corporates. I know you mentioned it, like the when it goes deathly quiet. If you've probably been on the other side of this, so what have you seen as good motivators from that supplier to be, or something that has it re-engaged your focus to move it forward? Now, some things will be just purely on, like you say, politically it needs to go to an X board or get sign off. But what have you seen that helps, if there is a need, reignite that interest and get things moving again? What have you seen from businesses selling to you that works and so forth?
So I think the best thing is communication of a joint roadmap. Okay, so if you do X, Y, Z, if we get this presentation together and you present to Jim or Sue or whoever, the next step is this, and that will take 2 weeks to do. And once you've got that 2 weeks, the only thing you need to do is this or whatever, and it's agreements. Quite often, there's two things. If it does go silent, invariably, it could be the comment that says, yeah, well, I'll just take it to this person and we'll get the sign off or whatever. There's no documented agreement of how you take it forward. And to re-energize that, again, the triangulation point of, you could be speaking to me and I say, I haven't heard from Nathan for 3 weeks, and I've left him 5 voicemails, 2 text messages and an email. Okay. Again, you need generally another person to be able to counteract that. It could be a very genuine reason why I haven't come back to you, but an agreement on a roadmap. So the reason why it's quiet is it's going to be quiet then, because you've got to wait 2 weeks. And I know that sounds really sort of basic stuff, but invariably there's no, great, we got a sale, great, we got an agreement, and then that's it. Now, some organizations, that's not the end of it. Yeah. It could be I haven't got anything because I was due to be paid 30 days ago and I haven't heard anything back. So, that would be my answer, is having something, an agreed roadmap to take it forward, that everybody is responsible for, both sides, and accountable. Yeah, because if something goes wrong, both expectations were wrong from the start of that process.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
It's a good question.
Great. Does anyone else have any more questions for us? Or Nathan?
I don't know, some of those examples that I gave made sense. I mean, I know everybody suffers from someone's disappeared off the face of the planet. But certainly the reorganization, sort of the organization thing, there could be several points within an organization that has interest in the other company, and you're only speaking to one of them. And there could be conflicts of interest as well. That's one of the.
I guess there's also the point about you don't want to upset the first person by chasing up somebody else.
Yeah, and then there's human nature. Say you're a very nice person, and we've had a great coffee chat. But can you tell me your manager? I mean, I'll be honest. Yeah, it just doesn't work. Be honest. I wasn't necessarily offended. This is a bit too strong word. I sat down with someone. I say, first things first. Can you send me your organisation chart? And you sort of go, well, yeah, okay, but I won't be able to put any names or telephone numbers on it. And I always felt a bit awkward being on the other side of that front. But, look, I really want to work with you. I really want to work with Fred Blogs and Company. What do you think is the outcomes for both of us? Where, what's going to, float your boat on this? And I'll tell you what's going to float boat on that. But by the way, these are some of the risks I see, and when should we actually say this isn't going to work, and we don't want to waste each other's time? Setting that example that they know that you're trying to understand the risks that they have, and respectfully said, everybody has only got so many hours in the week or the weekends to work, so that's really quite important. And you're saying it on behalf of them that you don't want to waste their time either.
Yeah. Cool. All right. I think that was quite a lot to digest. So
sorry.
Thank you. No, not a problem. But I think it's my advice to anyone is probably you put your email up. If you have questions to follow up, take it offline probably.
Yeah, I'm sure there's not an invoice attached to it. There's a quick question or text or anything else, then I'm very happy. A previous brilliant manager of mine said I could learn all the books in the world, but the footprints on my chest is where I was educated, which is absolutely true.
Well, thank you for your insight today, and
thank you.
Good luck. And yes, by all means, get in touch. I think with Nathan, he put his email up earlier, and it will be
no
on the
problem.
For now, happy Easter, everybody, and see you later in spring.
Thanks for your time.
Enjoy the chocolate.
Cheers.